Oh,
Yeah.
it's like trying to build a sandcastle on a roller coaster, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Companies pop up, entire industries pivot, and what was stable ground yesterday is chaos today. It's dizzying.
It truly is. And, this isn't just a phase. It feels like the new normal, really. The dynamism, the sheer speed of it, it demands constant vigilance and a strategic response from everyone in leadership,
Yeah,
especially those focused on managing costs and performance.
exactly. It forces organizations into a kind of survival of the fittest, pushing them to adapt quickly and often adopt entirely new ways of doing business, new business models, essentially.
And that's what we're diving into today. We've pulled material from a source, specifically excerpts from Chapter 5 of a text that looks right at managing costs strategically in the face of these emerging models.
Okay, so our mission for you, the listener, is to cut through some of that complexity. We're going to identify the core forces driving all this change, what our source calls change drivers, and then explore the new business models that are, defining today's landscape.
Right, and then look at the strategic responses companies are actually deploying.
Yeah, we want to pull out the insights that genuinely matter for understanding and navigating this fast-moving world, particularly, like you said, from a cost and performance perspective.
Let's start by just acknowledging this fundamental reality that the business environment is, well, intensely dynamic. Analyzing and responding to these changes isn't really optional anymore. It's essential for survival and, long-term thriving.
And it's not just that things are changing, it's understanding what's causing the change, right? The source introduces this idea of change drivers. These are the key elements sort of propelling the dynamism we see.
Right. Think of them as the engines of this constant motion. Some are clearly causes, others might seem like effects, but honestly, they often influence each other in a kind of loop.
How so?
Well, like digital technologies, for instance. They're a cause, they create new possibilities, right? Which then leads to things like agile organizations, which then, because they're agile, can better leverage those digital technologies. So it's circular.
I see. Okay. The source identifies, I think, 11 prominent drivers that have really reshaped things over the past decade or so.
Yeah, it's quite a list.
Things like, obviously, digital technologies, business ecosystems, hyper-competition, transformation, and disruption. Those seem like the big hitters.
Definitely. But there are others too, like lean startup methodologies, agile organizations, that whole dynamic between startups and incumbents.
Right, the David and Goliath thing.
Kind of, yeah. And entrepreneurship, innovation hubs, incubators, and supply chain partnerships. It paints a pretty comprehensive picture of the forces at play.
It does. So while we probably can't drill down into every single one in exhaustive detail, let's pull out the core insights from some of the most impactful, maybe starting with digital technologies.
Sounds good. That's a huge one.
Okay, let's unpack the tech side then. When we talk about digital technologies, we basically mean electronic tools that handle data. The Internet of Things, AI, blockchain, smartphones, cloud computing.
And the internet itself, really, as the connective tissue for all of it.
Right, the underlying basis.
And this source points out something pretty remarkable from the UN. Digital technologies have advanced faster than almost any innovation ever.
Wow.
Yeah, they reached 50% of the developing world's population in only 2 decades. The potential is just huge. They can be a great equalizer, enhancing connectivity, financial inclusion, access to trade.
That perspective is key. So what does this barrage of tech actually mean for strategic cost management?
Well, the core insight here is that these technologies fundamentally alter cost structures. They just change where the money goes. And they create completely new possibilities for efficiency and scale.
Okay, give me an example.
Absolutely. Take the Internet of Things, IoT, connecting physical devices with sensors. The source notes that by the end of 2019, something like 75% of large manufacturers were updating operations with IoT and analytics.
And why? What's the payoff?
Increased efficiency, mostly.
Yeah.
Flexibility, innovation, too. But the IoT data helps pinpoint exactly where costs are happening and where processes can be optimized. It gives you that visibility.
Okay. And robotics, that fits in here too.
Big time. And it's moved beyond just, automating simple repetitive tasks. Supported by AI and IoT, robots are handling analytical work now, boosting effectiveness and freeing up human labor for more complex things.
The stats are pretty wild, aren't they?
They are eye-popping. Over 500,000 new industrial robots installed in 2021 alone.
500,000.
Yeah, bringing the global operational stock to like 3.5 million. That's a massive shift of costs from, variable labor to fixed capital investment. Change the whole financial picture.
And AI, artificial intelligence,
Yep.
that's everywhere now.
Mm-hmm. It sort of mimics human thought, driving analytics and insights from this explosion of data we have. AI can optimize really complex processes, predict equipment failures.
So reducing maintenance costs before things break.
Exactly. Or even design products faster. The source mentions generative design as an example, saving huge amounts of engineering time. That's a significant cost reduction right there in the R&D phase.
And companies are actually using this.
Oh, yeah. Adoption is accelerating. A McKinsey survey found over half of companies were using AI in at least one function back in 2021. It's likely much higher now.
Okay, so automation is kind of the broader umbrella here. Technology doing work humans used to do.
Right, minimizing human input. And the source gives a great pair of examples to show the different levels, which I think is useful.
Oh,
Okay, so bank passbook printing kiosk. That's basic automation. It just replaces a teller for that one specific task. Pretty simple.
right.
Mobile banking, though, that's more of an extension. It adds new functionality using the tech.
Okay, makes sense.
But then installing a whole network of ATMs, that's transformation.
Okay. Why the difference?
Because it changes the fundamental service, the processes around it, even the culture around banking access. It needs significant capital investment upfront, obviously.
Sure.
But it drastically lowers the variable cost per transaction later and expands service hours without adding labor cost. That's a fundamental cost structure shift.
Got it. Okay, what about cloud computing? That seems foundational.
Absolutely foundational for modern agility. It's delivering infrastructure and software over the internet. Think infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service.
All the as a service thing.
Exactly, the ZaaS models, often pay as you go. And this shifts costs big time, moving from large upfront capital spending on servers and hardware to more flexible, often subscription-based operational spending.
So OpEx versus CapEx.
Precisely. The source mentions Gartner's 6Rs model for cloud migration strategies, different ways companies move, like rehosting, refactoring, etc., each with different effort levels and, importantly, different opportunities for cost optimization.
Interesting. Okay, 3D printing, additive manufacturing.
Yeah, that's changing production costs too. Building objects layer by layer allows for really rapid prototyping, reduces material waste, and makes producing complex or custom parts cost-effective, especially at lower volumes.
So niche manufacturing becomes cheaper.
Potentially, yeah. And McKinsey projects this market could hit $250 billion by 2025. So it's becoming a serious factor in manufacturing cost structures.
What about digital twins? That sounds futuristic.
It kind of is, but it's real now. Virtual replicas of physical assets or processes, they pull in data from IoT sensors and stuff to predict how the physical thing will behave.
Okay, and the cost angle.
It's powerful for strategic cost management because you can simulate and optimize before you invest in or change the physical asset. You can identify cost savings or avoid really expensive failures in engineering, operations, maintenance, all in the virtual world first.
Saves money by testing digitally. Makes sense. Augmented reality. AR.
Yeah, AR connects the physical, digital, and human worlds. The source actually calls it IoT for humans, which I thought was interesting.
How so?
Imagine a frontline worker wearing AR glasses, like HoloLens, seeing real-time data or instructions overlaid on the machine they're fixing.
Okay.
This can significantly improve their productivity, reduce errors, which means less rework cost. Plus, it helps with training, maybe lowering those costs too.
And mobile internet. That just feels like table stakes now.
It is, but it's still a foundational technology.
Yeah.
It enables so many of these other drivers. The source says 81% of manufacturing CEOs see it as strategically important. And with 5G coming online, the potential for more cost-saving applications like autonomous robotics or real-time supply chain optimization just gets bigger.
Okay, last one on the tech list. Blockchain. Still feels a bit niche to some.
Maybe, but the potential is there. It's that decentralized, tamper-proof ledger. Think distributed ledger technology, DLT. It can reduce verification costs and increase trust and transparency in complex networks, like supply chains.
So potentially lower transaction costs, less fraud.
Exactly. Improve efficiency in those cross-company interactions.
Wow, okay, that's a whirlwind tour of the tech drivers. But the key takeaway seems to be how these things aren't just gadgets. They fundamentally change where costs live, how flexible your cost structure can be, and crucially, where you need to invest strategically.
Precisely. It forces a strategic look at technology investment and its cost implications. Now, moving beyond the tech itself, the source highlights business ecosystems as another crucial driver.
Right. This idea borrowed from ecology, a network of organizations, suppliers, customers, competitors, government, all collaborating and competing.
Exactly. That idea of coexistence and coevolution. It's not just about your company in isolation anymore. It's this whole web you operate within.
And the strategic insight here, especially for cost management, is what?
It's profound, really. Competitive advantage isn't just about your company doing things better internally anymore. It's increasingly about how your partnerships help the entire ecosystem deliver value more effectively.
So your cost position is linked to your partner's costs.
Increasingly, yes. Companies that don't embrace this collaboration risk falling behind because their own cost structure can be undermined by inefficiencies elsewhere in the network they rely on.
The source gives that powerful example of the COVID-19 vaccines, right?
Yeah, a perfect illustration. You had Oxford AstraZeneca developing it, but they needed partners like the Serum Institute of India, which could produce an incredible 5,000 doses a minute.
Wow.
And that needed government funding, logistics support. It wasn't one company winning, it was an innovative ecosystem creating value at incredible speed and scale, managing costs across the network to achieve that.
That makes sense. An ecosystem effort.
Right. And the source mentions the 3 flywheels that can power these ecosystems. A data flywheel, learning faster from shared data, a growth flywheel, network effects attracting more participants, and a cost flywheel, scale effects lowering unit costs for everyone in the network.
And they reinforce each other.
Exactly. Which means strategic cost management has to understand the dynamics of the entire network, not just the costs inside your own 4 walls.
Okay, that's a big shift. Next up, hyper-competition. This sounds stressful.
It is. This isn't just strong competition. It's described as intense rivalry that creates genuine market instability. Buyers have a lot of power, they demand higher quality and lower prices, and they can switch suppliers easily.
So what's the core insight here for strategic cost management? That sounds pretty brutal.
It is, basically. Any competitive advantage is temporary.
Ouch.
Yeah. As soon as you create a cost advantage or a unique value proposition, a competitor will copy it or find a way around it, often quickly. So businesses have to constantly change their strategies.
Right. You're not competing to sustain one advantage anymore. You're competing to sustain value creation by pursuing a series of short-term advantages.
Exactly. You disrupt the market, you gain an edge, maybe based on cost, maybe features. But by the time competitors catch up, you ideally need to be moving to the next disruption.
Like the cellular phone manufacturers, constant new additions, while low-price competitors try to offer perfect substitutes for older models.
That's a good example. And it means strategic cost management isn't just about cutting costs defensively. It's about enabling the flexibility and the investment needed for continuous cost innovation and value creation, allowing you to fund that next move. The source mentions Diavini's 7S framework as one approach for thinking about strategy in these high-velocity markets.
Okay, so constant churn. Building on that intensity, another major driver is transformation and disruption.
Right. While business can evolve gradually, watches going from analog to digital to smart, sometimes an innovation causes a fundamental shift that transforms or disrupts an entire industry almost overnight.
So transformation is?
Transformation shifts the basis of competition. It realigns technology and business models for better customer engagement. The source uses India's UPI platform as an example. It totally transformed small merchant payments.
Making them faster, easier.
Exactly. And significantly changing the cost of transactions for both the merchants and their customers. It altered the competitive landscape for payments.
And disruption. How is that different?
Disruption is typically when a challenger, often a startup, offers greater value in a way that the established incumbents find it really hard to match directly. Think app-based transport services disrupting traditional taxis.
Yeah, classic example.
They use technology and a different cost structure, maybe leveraging driver-owned cars, dynamic pricing to offer convenience and often lower prices, providing what customers see as greater value.
So the source talks about disruptive innovation, right? Clayton Christensen's idea.
Yes, precisely. Define as transforming expensive, sophisticated products or services into something simpler, more affordable, and more accessible. This often opens up entirely new markets or serve customer segments that were previously ignored by the incumbents.
And this is different from just regular innovation.
Yes, it's distinct from what Christensen called sustaining innovation, which is more about incremental improvements for existing customers within the existing market framework, like smartphone companies releasing a slightly better camera each year.
Okay. And Christensen identified two main types of disruption.
That's right. First, low-end disruption. This is where a company enters at the bottom of the market, the lower profit segment, with a basic low-cost offering. Incumbents, focused on their higher-margin customers, often ignore it or even retreat upmarket.
Like the online booksellers example. Initially targeting price-sensitive buyers with limited selection before eventually moving up market.
Exactly. The second type is new market disruption. This targets customers who never used a similar product before, essentially creating a new market with a simpler, often more convenient or affordable product.
Like the early mini-computers. They didn't compete directly with mainframes initially. They served smaller businesses that couldn't afford mainframes at all.
Perfect example. The key difference is whether you're targeting overserved customers, low end, or underserved or non-consuming customers, new market.
Okay, so for strategic cost management, the big insight here is that disruption fundamentally changes the cost base of the industry, right?
Absolutely. Incumbents often have high fixed costs, legacy systems, established processes built around the old model. This makes it incredibly difficult and costly for them to compete effectively with a challenger who has a leaner, fundamentally different, disruptive cost structure from the start.
And the source mentioned three components needed for disruptive success.
Yes. An enabling technology, like the transistor for radios or the internet for online retail, an innovative business model, this is key, targeting those new or low-end customers, and a coherent value network, getting suppliers, partners, distributors on board with the new model.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but related to new ways of working. The lean startup methodology. What problem is this trying to solve?
It addresses the huge risk and potential cost of committing significant resources upfront when you're starting a new venture or launching a major new product. The source notes that 70–80% of a product's cost can be locked in during the design phase.
Before you even know if anyone wants it.
Exactly. And assumptions about the market might be completely wrong. That's incredibly wasteful.
So lean startup is what?
It's a framework for searching for a viable business model through rapid experimentation and customer feedback rather than executing a predefined plan based on guesswork. It's about rigorously testing your hypotheses using something called a minimum viable product, or MVP.
Right, the MVP. Source had that great Dropbox example.
Yeah, that's classic. Their MVP wasn't even functional software. It was just a 3-minute screencast explaining the concept.
And that was enough.
It was enough to validate the core idea and get thousands of signups before they invested heavily in building the full, scalable product. Think of the development costs saved by proving demand first.
Okay, so the strategic cost insight here is really about efficiency in the search phase, isn't it?
Precisely. It saves potentially enormous amounts of money by avoiding building things customers don't want or need. You increase the efficiency of your R&D and product development spend by focusing resources on validated learning, not just building features based on assumptions.
And the source contrasts it with traditional approaches.
Yeah, quite clearly. Traditional, detailed business plan first. Lean. Flexible business model hypothesis tested iteratively. Traditional, product management focus. Lean, customer development focus, getting out and talking to users. Traditional, functional silos. Lean, agile, customer-focused teams.
For metrics too, right?
Absolutely. Traditional accounting metrics versus what Lean calls metrics that matter. Things like customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, conversion rates, things that actually measure progress towards a viable business.
Yeah.
And failure is expected. It's part of learning, not treated as an exception to be punished. Lean prioritizes rapid, good enough data over slow, perfect data.
And it uses that build, measure, learn loop.
Exactly. Identify a problem hypothesis, build an MVP to test it, measure how customers react, learn from the data, pivot or persevere based on actionable metrics. It's a cycle designed to reduce wasted effort and cost.
Closely related, then, are agile organizations.
Very much so. These are organizations specifically designed to respond quickly to changing environments and customer needs. Adaptability is baked into their structure and processes.
And the contrast with traditional organizations is pretty stark.
Definitely. Traditional orgs are often hierarchical, siloed, maybe bureaucratic, with a strict chain of command. The source uses the metaphor. Traditional is like a stable machine. Agile is like a responsive, living organism.
A network of teams.
Yeah, a network of empowered, collaborative teams, often focused around specific customer needs or products, with high standards but also high autonomy, allowing them to react fast to new competitors, tech shifts, market changes.
So what's the strategic cost implication here? Why go agile?
Well, agile structures can potentially lower coordination costs in complex, fast-moving environments compared to rigid hierarchies. They can also accelerate time to market for new products or features.
Which means getting revenue faster.
Right, increasing revenue velocity. And it enables faster responses to cost pressures or opportunities. Innovation is really core to it, and it often links with design thinking, understanding user problems first, then lean startup for validating the model, and finally agile for actually building and iterating on the product efficiently.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about that dynamic between startups and incumbents? That itself is listed as a change driver.
It is, because their interaction fuels a lot of the disruption and change we see. Startups, your Netflix, your Uber, often use disruptive models enabled by new technology. Incumbents are the established players they're challenging.
And the battle, as the source calls it.
Yeah, it's framed as whether the startup can achieve distribution and scale before the established incumbent can adapt and innovate effectively.
And the definitions are key here, too.
Yes. A startup is defined as a temporary organization designed to look for a business model that is repeatable and scalable. An incumbent is a permanent organization designed to execute a business model that is repeatable and scalable, searching versus executing.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Incumbents have assets startups lack, obviously.
Yeah, customers, established infrastructure, brand recognition, systems, cash flow.
But startups have things incumbents often lack.
Fluidity, flexibility, speed, agility, often a more digital native mindset, and critically, a willingness or necessity to challenge the status quo, even their own initial ideas. Incumbents can be hampered by legacy systems, processes, and culture.
The source details some key differences across business areas that seem to have direct cost and resource implications, like organization structure.
Right. Startups tend to be lean, cross-functional. Teams have shared responsibility, more empowerment. Incumbents often hierarchical, functional silos, more limited responsibility down the chain. That affects speed and overhead costs.
And culture.
Big difference. Startups often more risk-taking, focused on capturing market share, less fear of failure initially. Incumbents often more risk-averse, focused on defending existing market share, fear of cannibalizing existing revenue streams. That impacts investment decisions and innovation costs.
The operating models differ too.
Hugely. Startups might start with small production runs, no minimum market size needed initially, rely heavily on online channels or third parties, fewer set processes at first, use digital media with tight spending. Incumbents often need a minimum viable market size, rely on established, often offline networks, have stable but potentially rigid processes, higher spend on traditional media. These directly affect operational costs, marketing efficiency, scalability costs.
What about innovation itself?
Startups often focus on what consumers actually want, even in niche categories. Faster product turnaround times, maybe 6 to 8 months. They might spend a higher percentage of funds on R&D versus marketing early on. Incumbents tend to offer variations on what they're already good at, adjacent categories. Maybe slower turnaround times, 12, 18 months, cited potentially lower relative R&D spend compared to large marketing budgets.
And financing. That must impact cost strategy.
Dramatically. Startups are seldom profitable initially, rely on external investment, answerable to investors focused on growth potential. Incumbents often have strong financial positions, can fund strategic investments internally, but are answerable to shareholders often focused on quarterly profits and dividends. This affects their ability and willingness to make long-term, potentially loss-making bets on disruptive innovation. Understanding these differences is crucial for strategic cost decisions on both sides.
Okay. So if incumbents struggle with that startup energy, what about entrepreneurship? Bringing it inside.
Exactly. That's the idea. It's entrepreneurship happening within an existing, established business. Individuals pursuing new opportunities, often acting somewhat independently of the resources they currently control within the formal structure.
A dreamer who does, as the source puts it.
Yeah, I like that phrase. Someone with vision, but also involved in the execution. The purpose is really to counter stagnation, foster internal innovation, and potentially find new avenues for cost efficiency or revenue growth without having to start a completely separate company.
So how does this connect to strategic cost and performance management?
The source frames it as a potentially revolutionary system to speed up innovation in large companies by leveraging existing resources and identifying entrepreneurial talent. But here's a key point. It suggests that for these initiatives to be truly sustainable and cost-effective, maybe they should be viewed and managed more like profit centers rather than just traditional cost centers.
Forcing them to focus on value creation and ROI, not just spending a budget.
Precisely. It pushes them towards demonstrating real business impact, which aligns better with overall strategic cost efficiency goals.
Okay, and what about external help? Innovation hubs and incubators.
These provide physical spaces and programs to nurture new ideas and startups. An innovation hub might just be a collaborative space.
But an incubator is more specific.
Yes. An incubator typically focuses on nurturing very early-stage startups, often those that don't even have a fully formed business model yet. They help develop the idea into a viable product, sometimes called a school for startups.
And that's different from an accelerator.
Right. Accelerators usually work with startups that already have an MVP and a clearer business model. They focus on accelerating growth rapidly over a short period, providing mentorship, connections, maybe funding to help them scale quickly. Incubators are about creation. Accelerators are about scaling.
And the cost angle for established companies using these.
It can be a relatively lower-cost way to explore potential new markets, technologies, or disruptive threats without the full internal cost and commitment of setting up a major R&D project or internal venture from scratch. Tap into external innovation.
Got it. Okay. Final driver on the list, supply chain partnerships.
Crucial one. This is all about coordinating effectively with both internal functions and external partners, suppliers, distributors, logistics providers to optimize the flow of goods and information.
Why is this so essential now?
Well, partly for effective supply chain management in general, but increasingly for business resilience too. Good partnerships increase agility, they help reduce that bullwhip effect.
No, where small demand changes ripple upstream and get amplified.
Exactly, causing massive swings in inventory and production, which is incredibly costly. Better partnership and, crucially, better information flow smooths that out.
So the strategic cost implication is pretty significant here.
Oh, absolutely. Improved partnership drives efficiency and cost reduction across the entire chain, not just within your own company's operations. Optimizing the whole network benefits everyone involved.
And the source mentions different approaches.
Yeah, approaches to SCM innovation like rapid, focused on speed and efficiency, agile, focused on responding quickly to demand changes, and lean, focused on eliminating waste throughout the chain. But the key point is that effective collaboration is essential to achieve any of these.
And that collaboration isn't always easy.
Apparently not. A report cited in the source notes a gap. Many companies strategize about supply chain innovation, but few actually believe their supply chains are truly innovative, often blaming a lack of effective collaboration with partners.
So what's needed for seamless collaboration? The source mentioned IT.
Heavily reliant on IT, yes. Things like real-time data sharing across partners, configurable workflows, using AI and machine learning to identify potential disruptions or opportunities, having in-context messaging so partners can communicate quickly without switching systems, and achieving genuine end-to-end visibility.
Knowing where inventory is, potential supplier issues.
Right. Knowing capacity constraints, forecasting mismatches, foundational tech like EDI, RFID, point-of-sale data sharing enables this.
And the benefits of specific partnership software.
Things like better agility, improved forecasting accuracy, which directly reduces costly inventory errors or stockouts, reducing that bullwhip effect, creating a single source of truth, which cuts down on disputes and reconciliation costs, and ultimately building stronger, more trusting relationships.
So for strategic cost management, it's really about recognizing that optimizing the cost of the whole chain through partnership and technology is key to competitiveness and profitability for everyone involved.
Exactly. It's a system view of cost.
Okay, so we've explored these powerful forces, the digital wave, the rise of ecosystems, hypercompetition, disruption, new methodologies like lean and agile, the startup incumbent dance, and the importance of partnerships. These forces don't exist in a vacuum, do they? They fundamentally influence how businesses actually operate and make money.
Precisely. They influence the business model. And a business model, essentially, is just how a business works. It's economic logic, how it creates and delivers value to customers, and crucially, how it captures revenue and makes a profit.
So it's strategically vital for cost and performance.
Yeah.
It dictates where costs happen, how value gets delivered, how money comes in.
Absolutely. And the point the source makes is that generic, traditional models often just don't cut it anymore in this dynamic environment. They fail in disruptive situations, or when sustainability becomes a major focus, or when you're trying to operate in very different emerging markets.
Which has led to a whole host of new models popping up.
Right. The source categorizes these into three broad groups: hyper-disruptive models, models particularly relevant to sustainability, and models tailored for emerging national markets.
Okay, let's tackle the hyper-disruptive ones first. These sound aggressive.
They often are. They're designed to fundamentally create, disintermediate, re-engineer, or optimize products, services, markets. Companies use them to gain a significant competitive advantage and sometimes, as the source puts it rather bluntly, to crush competitors.
Okay, what are some key types?
Well, a big one is the free model. The core product or service is given away free to a massive user base.
How does that make money?
Revenue comes from selling a premium version, extra features, or related services to a smaller subset of that base or through other means. The cost insight here is crucial. This model relies on incredibly low, often near zero, marginal costs for delivering the free tier.
Like digital goods.
Exactly. And it often scales virally through word of mouth because it's free, dramatically lowering customer acquisition costs compared to traditional paid models. Think social media platforms.
And there are different flavors of free.
Yes, several subcategories. There's advertising or hidden revenue. Users get it free. Advertisers pay to reach them, like search engines. There's cross-subsidization, the classic razor blade model: give away or sell a low-cost item, the razor, to drive high-margin sales of a necessary complementary item, the blades.
Printers and ink cartridges, too.
Perfect example. Then there's open source, sometimes called the gift model. Access to the core tech is free. Maybe revenue comes from support, consulting, or related proprietary software. The community helps develop the tech, lowering core development costs for the originator. Think Wikipedia or Linux distributions.
Okay, any others?
And promotion, offering a low-cost or free item specifically to encourage the purchase of another more profitable item, like supermarket giveaways or amenities at petrol pumps.
Right. What's next after free?
The subscription model. This locks access, requiring a recurring fee. Newspapers, magazines, streaming services like Netflix or Spotify, many SaaS products.
And the cost insight there.
It's all about predictable, recurring revenue and focusing on customer lifetime value, CLV. You might have high upfront customer acquisition costs, but you aim to recoup that and generate profit over the long term through repeated payments. Managing churn-keeping subscribers becomes critical for cost effectiveness.
Okay. Freemium. That sounds like a mix.
It is. It's very common in digital products and services. Users get basic features free, often paying with their data or attention, and then they pay a fee for upgrades, premium features, or removing ads.
Like professional networking sites or grammar checking software.
Exactly. It works well if the marginal cost of serving free users is very low and less than the value derived from their data or the potential for upgrades. It acts like digital sampling, lowering the cost of attracting users and providing data to understand who might convert, improving the efficiency of sales and marketing spend.
You can evolve from a free model too, right?
Often does, yeah. Then there's the digital platform or e-commerce model. This provides a marketplace, connecting buyers and sellers, and typically earns a fee or commission on each transaction.
Like Amazon Marketplace or eBay.
Right. And it has subcategories too. B2B platforms connecting businesses like Alibaba, B2C connecting businesses to consumers, Amazon, Flipkart, C2C connecting consumers to consumers like OLX or eBay, and even C2B, where consumers offer services to organizations.
And the strategic cost insight.
It's the incredibly low marginal cost per transaction once the platform infrastructure is built. This allows for immense scale efficiency. The main costs are building and maintaining the platform technology and attracting and retaining both buyers and sellers.
Okay. The hypermarket model.
This one aims squarely for cost leadership through extreme economies of scale. Whether it's a physical store like Dmart, an online one like Amazon's Direct Retail, or a hybrid. The goal is to offer the lowest prices by driving down operational costs relentlessly through high volume and efficiency, often putting intense pressure on smaller competitors.
Got it. Access over ownership.
This is fueled by the sharing economy and digital platforms. It offers temporary access to an asset like a car, a bike, maybe even tools, instead of requiring the customer to buy it outright.
Ride-sharing apps, vehicle rentals.
Exactly. The cost insight here is the shift of the high capital cost of ownership away from the individual consumer and onto the provider. The provider can then focus on managing the asset's life cycle costs, maintenance, insurance, depreciation, and maximizing utilization across many users to make it cost-effective.
Interesting, this service ecosystem model.
This involved integrating multiple products and services, often from one major brand, to create a seamless experience that effectively locks customers into that ecosystem. Think of premium tech brands where devices work best together.
Makes it hard to switch just one piece.
Precisely. The cost insight for the company is the high switching costs imposed on the customer, which reduces churn costs and potentially allows for premium pricing across the various parts of the ecosystem because customers value the integration.
Okay, the experience model.
This differentiates by adding unique, memorable, often premium experiences around a product or service. Think luxury car brands offering factory tours or exclusive events, or airlines providing high-end lounges.
So it's about more than just the product.
Right. While this might add costs to deliver the experience, the idea is that it creates strong brand loyalty, a high barrier to switching based on emotion and perceived status, and allows for premium pricing that more than offsets the experiential cost. It disrupts by adding an intangible layer.
And finally, the on-demand model.
This leverages digital technology to monetize time and convenience, charging a premium for instant access to goods or services, app-based transport, instant grocery, or food delivery.
We use these all the time now.
Right. The cost challenge here is efficiently managing the highly variable costs involved delivery fees, paying service providers like drivers or shoppers, while ensuring the platform technology is robust and user-friendly enough to justify the premium price customers pay for that immediate gratification. Balancing supply and demand in real time is key to cost control.
Wow, that's a lot of disruptive models. Okay, let's shift to the second category, models relevant to sustainability.
Okay. A sustainable business model aims to address not just economic performance, but also social and environmental perspectives. It's about creating value across all three dimensions.
Yeah, so it connects to things like the UN Sustainable Development Goal.
Exactly. Promoting prosperity while protecting the environment and addressing social needs. The source stresses that truly sustainable models create both monetary and non-monetary value for a diverse range of stakeholders, not just shareholders.
And for strategic cost management, what does this mean?
It means broadening the definition of cost. You need to consider and manage environmental costs like your carbon footprint, resource depletion, waste generation, and social costs related to ethics, labor practices, community impact, diversity, and inclusion. The insight is that proactively managing these costs can actually create long-term value, enhance reputation, attract talent and customers, and mitigate future regulatory or environmental risks and their associated financial costs.
So it's an investment, not just a cost center.
Ideally, yes. The source briefly mentions several approaches for developing sustainable models. One is product-service systems.
What's that?
Instead of selling a product, you sell the service the product provides. Think renting tools instead of buying them, or paying for mobility services instead of owning a car.
How does that help sustainability and cost?
For the provider, the revenue and cost model shifts. They retain ownership, so they're incentivized to design durable, repairable, recyclable products and manage their entire life cycle efficiently. For the user, it can lower the upfront cost of access and reduce overall consumption. The sharing economy itself is another example, using idle resources like cars or apartments more efficiently, which lowers the overall system-wide cost and resource footprint of accessing those things.
But the source included a caution here.
Yes. Just adopting these models isn't enough. Moving the whole economy towards sustainability requires broader changes. Traditional business success benchmarks often focus narrowly on financial competition and shareholder value, which can actively ignore or even undermine sustainability considerations. So a deeper shift in perspective is often needed.
Okay. And the final category, models relevant to emerging national markets.
Right. These are countries often characterized by intermediate income levels, rapid catch-up growth, ongoing institutional changes, and increasing integration into the global economy. Think BRICS countries and others.
And they're important because
They represent a massive and growing portion of global consumption. The source mentions figures from the early 2010s showing they already accounted for 60% of the world's population and 45% of global GDP. India and China alone are over a third of the world's population. It's a huge marketing opportunity.
But here's the catch, right? Especially for cost management.
Absolutely critical point. To succeed in these markets, international companies generally cannot just transplant their standard business models from developed markets. They usually have to drastically customize their offerings and operations. And very often, this means cutting costs significantly to make products affordable for highly price-sensitive consumers.
They need to act more like startups again. Rethink from scratch.
Pretty much, yeah. They need to rethink their value proposition, their processes, their supply chains, everything, with a laser focus on achieving a much lower cost structure. Think about the massive price difference you often see for the same international magazine or packaged food item in, say, Europe versus India. That reflects the need to adapt the cost model.
Why is this necessary? What's different about these markets?
The source lists several characteristics that drive this need for customization and cost reduction. Things like inadequate infrastructure, which increases logistics costs, chronic shortages of resources, intense competition, often from unbranded local players driving prices down, different distribution channel structures and challenges, and sometimes less stable institutional or regulatory environments. All these factors directly impact strategic cost management, demanding innovative, frugal, and highly localized approaches.
Okay, so we've seen the forces shaking things up, the drivers, and we've explored many of the new kinds of business models that are emerging in response. That brings us to the final piece.
Yeah.
How do companies strategically respond to all this?
Right, because just understanding isn't enough, you have to act. The responses need to address those fundamental drivers we talked about. And obviously, they aren't one size fits all. They depend heavily on the specific organization, its industry, its resources, and the particular challenge it's facing.
They range from adapting existing models to maybe even counter-disrupting.
Exactly. It's a spectrum. Let's look at responses related to some key drivers. First, digital technologies.
Okay. How do companies respond strategically here?
Well, for startups, innovation and disruption using digital tech is their core business model, often from day one. For incumbents, the big strategic challenge and cost implication is balancing the need to optimize their existing, often analog-heavy, operations which still generate cash with making the necessary, often massive, investments in digital transformation to stay relevant and competitive for the future.
Like telcos investing billions in rolling out 5G networks.
Perfect example. Or traditional banks responding to fintech startups like Razorpay, which built entirely new digitally native payment cost structures from the ground up. Incumbents have to decide how much to invest, where, and how quickly, often facing resistance due to the cost and complexity.
Okay. What about responding to the rise of business ecosystems?
Here, the strategic response has to be centered around value within the network. Since we said competitive advantage is increasingly about how partnerships help the entire network win, strategy needs to focus on identifying where value is created in the ecosystem and how your company can best capture a share of it.
So how do you capture value in an ecosystem?
The source suggests a few ways. You could focus on adapting quickly to meet changing customer needs that emerge within the ecosystem, like adding features to record TV shows as DVRs became popular, or developing ready-to-eat meals as lifestyles changed. You could strive to be the locus of USP, the unique selling proposition that pulls customers into the ecosystem, like a powerful processor brand that makes people choose a certain laptop, allowing the processor maker to capture significant value.
Or you could be an integrator.
Right. Become an indispensable integrator who redefines the value chain and sits at a key control point. Think app stores. They integrate developers and users, taking a commission and fundamentally changing the cost structure and value capture for software distribution.
And creating these ecosystems requires certain strategic approaches.
Yes, things like fostering flexibility and cooperation in relationships, ensuring enhanced accountability among partners, treating them more like stakeholders, enabling the free flow of information through technology, which reduces coordination costs but raises confidentiality challenges, embracing the shared economy concept by contributing resources to a pool while accessing others, and leveraging economics of scope through alliances.
Okay. How do you respond strategically to hypercompetition, where advantage is fleeting?
The core strategic response here is to fully accept the temporary nature of any advantage and shift focus to creating a series of them. You can't defend one position for long.
So you have to be constantly on the offense.
Pretty much. You must aggressively challenge competitors, strive for short-term advantages through market disruption, maybe a new feature, a lower cost process, a novel marketing approach, capture value from it, and then immediately start moving to the next one before competitors neutralize the current advantage.
Like those pen manufacturers constantly bringing out new designs or ink technology.
That'd be an example, yeah. This requires a company culture that fosters continuous R&D and innovation at all levels. It might mean adopting lean startup approaches internally to test new ideas quickly and cheaply. Collaboration becomes vital, and timing, knowing when to launch the next disruption, is absolutely critical. It links back to that Diaveni 7S framework for managing in high-velocity environments.
Right. Now, the big one, responding strategically to transformations and disruptions. Continuous improvement isn't enough here, is it?
Definitely not. When the fundamental basis of competition shifts, just tweaking the old model won't work. The strategic response isn't just about finding new efficiencies, it's often about survival. We saw market leaders in mobile phones and televisions fail because they didn't respond effectively to disruptive shifts.
So what does the spectrum of responses look like here, according to the source?
It ranges quite widely depending on the incumbent situation and the nature of the disruption. At one end, you could decide to milk as cash cow. Basically, accept the business is declining due to disruption, stop investing heavily in it, and just harvest as much cash flow as possible from it for as long as possible while minimizing further costs. Think maybe some DVD rental businesses did this.
Okay, what else?
You could invest or counter-invest with incremental changes, trying to adapt your existing model to compete better, maybe adding new features or improving efficiency, like telcos investing in fiber optics to counter cable providers.
Or you could try to stop the disruption.
Yes, the source calls this blocking the path or creating hurdles. This might involve leveraging intellectual property rights, patents to slow down competitors, or sometimes trying to create regulatory or other obstacles. Think of taxi unions lobbying against app-based transport services, though these approaches come with their own significant legal, lobbying, and reputational costs and risks.
What about fighting fire with fire?
That's counter-disruption. This is an aggressive response where the incumbent launches its own disruptive model or innovation to directly challenge the newcomer or even disrupt another part of the market. This is often a high-cost, high-risk strategy, especially for large incumbents trying to replicate startup agility.
Okay. Any other options?
You could restrict presence and shift focus on core. This means strategically deciding not to compete in the disrupted segment, pulling back, perhaps shedding non-core or unprofitable business units, and concentrating investment and resources on the areas where the company still has a strong competitive advantage and can win. Like some IT firms shifting focus away from commoditized services towards higher value consulting.
And the final option?
Sometimes the only rational response is to withdraw entirely. Exit the market segment, liquidate assets related to that business, and redirect the value elsewhere. A tough decision, but sometimes necessary to avoid throwing good money after bad.
So, when choosing between these responses, what should companies consider?
The source highlights a few key considerations. First, resource availability and expectations. What will the response cost, and what are the likely returns? Second, the strategic importance of the segment being disrupted. Is it core to the business or peripheral? How big is the potential loss or gain? Third, the company's actual capability in the disruption area. Do they have the skills, technology, culture to compete effectively, or can they realistically acquire them?
And for the innovators rolling out the disruption, they have considerations too.
Absolutely. They need to weigh the trade-off between the potential advantages of being the first mover, market share capture, brand recognition, versus the high uncertainty and risks involved. Waiting might be less risky, but could mean losing the market to faster followers. And crucially, they need to be sure they have the capability not just to innovate, but to actually exploit the commercial benefits. Can they scale the disruption, make it profitable, and build a sustainable business around it?
It really drives home that there's no single simple answer, is there? Navigating this requires a really flexible strategic playbook, tailored to the specific drivers and disruptions hitting your organization.
Absolutely. So just to bring it all together for you, the listener, mastering today's really dynamic business environment, especially from a cost and performance perspective, hinges on understanding those forces driving change, the digital tsunami, evolving ecosystems, that relentless competition, and the constant potential for disruption.
And then recognizing the new kinds of business models they spawn.
Right, and critically, having strategic responses ready to deploy, whether you're the incumbent defending or the startup attacking.
We've tried to pull out the core insights from the source material we looked at. Now maybe take a moment to consider, which of these change drivers feel most pressing or relevant in your world, in your industry or field of interest?
Yeah, and how might some of these emerging business models we discussed whether it's free, subscription, platform-based, or those focused on sustainability, or tailored for emerging markets. How might they show up, challenge, or even be applicable to your business or organization?
And maybe one final thought. Building on that idea of strategic responses to constant disruption, given the speed and intensity we've discussed, is any competitive advantage truly sustainable anymore in the long run?
That's the big question, isn't it? Or are businesses, maybe all of us, simply playing a constant high-stakes game of moving from one temporary advantage to the next? And if that's the new reality, how does strategic cost management itself need to fundamentally change when the primary goal isn't long-term stability or optimizing a fixed model, but enabling continuous market disruption and adaptation? Something to mull over.